Okay, good morning, everyone. Matt Braden here from the GPAR team. Thanks for joining us on this Friday morning. Today we have Trent Pettus doing his presentation. But before we get into that, we'll look to next week after the weekend, and that would be on Tuesday. We're going to have another one of these sessions, and it will be with Bill Dare from Spotlight Home Inspection LLC. I hope you'll join us for that one. It's a really great session. It's going to be involving a look at doing pre-listing in home inspections. If you have seen any of the previous presentations done by Bill, he did two in the past for us. They were really good, super helpful. He has a really great style of presentation, and he's an expert in this kind of stuff. And when I say expert, literally, he takes the stand in court cases and is made an expert witness. So he knows his stuff, and he's really good at sharing his insight and experience over many decades of doing this type of work. The other session that he did for us most recently was about stucco. So I'm not sure if you guys saw that one. It was really, really good. It was eye-opening, and it was getting into different things that are popping up around this entire region as it relates to bad stucco installation from a few over the last 20 years or so, and how those problems are manifesting and popping up all over the place. So it was very insightful. We have that in our video library. In case you didn't know this, we have a YouTube channel that has a whole host of videos. We have about 50 or so videos in there. I'll drop the link into that YouTube channel. I suggest subscribing to that. So just in case if you miss any of our other presentations in the future, you'll get an alert and it will tell you, hey, new video has been posted by GPAR. So it's a really great way that just in case if you miss out on one of the educational sessions, that you can catch up on your own time to go ahead and watch a video. One last thing before we get to Trent, and that is code of ethics. Hopefully everyone here has fulfilled their code of ethics responsibility. Perhaps you haven't. The deadline is at the end of the year, but we're trying to make a really good push to get our members to take care of it now, or to start working on taking care of it now. So there are many ways that you can go ahead and fulfill that requirement. But there are two really easy ways. One is via the NAR website, in which you can start doing the program. You have 30 days from the day you start it to complete it. And then the other way to do it is via one of our online Zoom sessions. So we are working to go get one lined up for the month of July. We had one just the other day with over 150 GPAR members tuning in. So keep your eyes open on your inbox for the next upcoming dates. And please, we encourage you, share the word with your fellow Realtor members. Donna, who's here from the team, we don't want her having a headache and having her head pop off of her shoulders in December because she's trying to chase after GPAR folks who haven't fulfilled the requirement. We like Donna. We like Donna's head on her shoulders. We don't want it popping off and rolling down South Broad Street. So anything you can do to, one, fulfill your requirement, or two, help out a friend and tell them, hey, take care of it. So with that, speaking of taking care of it, that would be Trent Pettus. He always takes care of it when he joins us for one of his sessions. We have a couple of them in the hopper with us after today, or I should say on deck after today. Trent is a great contributor to the GPAR Association. He has served as a director on our board of directors. He has served as a director representing GPAR out of the Pennsylvania Association. He always speaks at our in-person orientations. Trent is a great contributor to our association. He's been acknowledged as a VIP by past president Chris Summers. So with that, I want to give a warm welcome to Trent Pettus. Good morning, Trent.
Good morning, Matt. How are you?
Great. How are you?
Good. Good morning, everyone.
Oh, yeah, Trent, you like to see people's faces, right?
Yes.
All right. So don't be shy.
Right.
We have some people showing their face. I see Kathleen Sheridan. She's already in the mix. She's waving.
Kathleen's always in the mix. That's why.
All right. So look, there's no shame.
If you can show your face, and if you can, we appreciate it. If you can't, we'll understand that too. All right.
But Trent will guilt you into it. So it's best to just comply.
I agree. And I hope more people come on. Just so I can, if you've ever been in one of these with me, you know that I like to be interactive. So if you have questions or you don't understand anything as I talk, just stop me. Let's talk. I know we have some experienced agents on, like I see Kathleen and Anastasia. So if you all have anything to add, you add, because I don't know everything. There are different ways you can look at this or do this business, but so let's be interactive and just have fun and learn at the same time. Does that sound good? Is everybody on mute? Because is that Matt? Are people on mute?
By default, but they can unmute themselves.
Okay. All
And
right.
you're encouraged to do so. Trent wants you to bark stuff out at him.
Yeah, talk to me. I like to be. First, let me just say that I believe that one of these, I think, to being a successful agent, I know there's some new agents on, some seasoned agents on, but one of the things I found, and having been in this business since 2001, and I think I've done well in it, is that you need to know we are professionals. You should see yourself and view yourself as a real estate professional, and real estate professionals know their tools. And these documents, I look at these documents as part of our tools. I think that if I were to hire a contractor to come to my house and the contractor said to me, I don't know how to use the tools in my bag, I don't know if I would want that contractor to come back. I probably wouldn't even want him or her to even do the work. And that's kind of how I look at our documents. I believe that you ought to know, if you're in this business, you ought to have an idea of what you use. And these documents are tools. You should know what's in these documents. There have been many times over the years where people have said things, and I would say agents have said, oh, Trent, just think of an example. I remember an agent said to me, hey, Trent, if your client does not get a mortgage commitment by tomorrow, we're going to just keep their $10,000 deposit. And I remember saying, well, where is that in the agreement of sale? I said, could you show that to me? Obviously, it's not an agreement of sale, but that's what she thought was an agreement of sale. And this was an agent who had been in the business for 20 years and had always said that to agents, but had no idea that the agreement of sale does not say that the seller can keep the buyer's deposit money if that buyer does not produce a mortgage commitment by the date that's specified in the agreement of sale. It says just the opposite. It says that the seller has to return the money. The seller can terminate the contract, but that seller must return that deposit money to that buyer. I say that to say that when you know what's in the contracts, not only are you a better agent, but I think you just do better in this business, and you look better when you're sitting across from a client or potential client or customer, and you kind of know what you're talking about. It just makes you look more professional, and that's the name of the game for me. So that's where I start. Any questions, any comments before and then we get started? Anybody want to say anything? I love to hear people, because then I think no one's listening to me. Can someone just say something? Cheryl, say something.
Looking forward to all the content to come, and I agree with everything you said, Trent. We need the tools in our tool belt and how to use them.
Well, of course, Anastasia, you're so smart, because I would expect you to say that. Thank you very much, and I thank you. Yes, and great agent there too. All right, let's go. Let's start first. I always like to start with the consumer notice. First document you should give to a consumer when you meet them is the consumer notice. Anybody know when you should give them that consumer notice? If they call you on the telephone and they ask you about the zoning classification, for instance, would you have to give them a consumer notice? Nobody wants to answer. Okay, well, I answer. No. If you are having, you have to present a consumer notice when you have well, let's read what the consumer notice actually says. And I tell you, it says, in an effort to enable consumers of real estate services to make informed decisions about business relationships they may have with real estate brokers and salespersons or licensees, the Real Estate License and Registration Act requires that consumers be provided with this consumer notice at the initial interview. Well, what's the definition of an initial interview? Well, the Real Estate License and Registration Act defines initial interview as this, and I've written it down. It's a first contact between the agent and the consumer where a substantive, and that's our key word, a substantive conversation about real estate occurs. So if someone to call and ask you the zone and classification of a property, well, that's not a substantive conversation about real estate. You wouldn't have to read a consumer notice or provide them with a consumer notice. If they called you and they said, hey, I have a pre-approval Wells Fargo for $300,000. My lease expires end of June. I need to be in a place by this. I've saved this amount of money. You need to say, wait, let me get you the consumer notice. You can get it to them any way you want, but if you cannot get it to them by fax or text or any way, you need to give them an oral consumer notice. Keep in mind, does everybody know that there is an oral consumer notice that you ought to read? You have to read it verbatim. You can just download it. Some people I see put it on their email. So when they send an email, the oral consumer notice is there. If you send any properties to that person, they have to click that they received and read the agreed to the consumer notice, but you need to read oral consumer notice. And then when you meet that person for the first time, then you must give them a copy of that consumer notice. And for newer agents, keep in mind that consumer notice must be kept for 6 months. Real Estate License and Registration Act requires that you, the agent, keep that consumer notice for 6 months if that person's not become a client. If that's a client, then that notice should be put in a file and your broker is required to keep it for 3 years. So if this person is someone you just talked to, they come into the office, you give them a consumer notice, and then you never hear from them again, you need to have a file with those consumer notices because you are required to keep that consumer notice for 6 months. Otherwise, your broker must keep it for 3 years. Any questions, comments? All right. Well, all right, let's go over to the listing contract, because that's why we're here. Let's take a look at the listing contract. I want to just go through every paragraph. Let's start with, first of all, this is, if you see, this is an exclusive right to sell real estate.
Monday morning. All right, do Monday then, and just let me know the other day.
This is an exclusive right to sell. Remember, there are 3 types of listing contracts. PAR does not have, first of all, there's an exclusive right to sell, which is what we use. PAR does not, they don't have in their library the exclusive agency listing or non-exclusive agency listing, or what we call an open listing. So we only use the exclusive right to sell. What's the difference between an exclusive right to sell and others? Exclusive right to sell means that no matter who brings forth the buyer, that seller owes the broker a fee or commission. So if the seller decides to find his or her own buyer, that broker has earned a commission. Doesn't matter who brings forth the buyer, the commission is earned. That's why, and this is the best listing contract, and the only one I would ever use because I think it's the best one. I don't want to compete with the seller. If I list the property to seller and the seller goes out and has an open house or tells people at her job or his job about the property, and one of the coworkers says, hey, I want to buy it, and then they sell it to them, then I would be out of a commission. And I've done all the marketing and advertising, and that wouldn't be fair. Well, it may be fair, but I wouldn't do it. So an exclusive right to sell listing protects all of us so that when we do put work out, we're at least compensated for it. So an exclusive right to sell. And if you look at paragraph 2, and I'm gonna go through all of them. If you go to, not paragraph 2, paragraph 5(2)(a), and in an exclusive right to sell contract, it must have in bold this information. Paragraph 5(2)(a), it says a property or any ownership interest in it is sold or exchanged on the term of this contract by the broker, the broker's licensee, that's I believe the salesperson, associate broker, seller, or by any person or broker at the listing price or any price acceptable to the seller, then that seller would owe a commission to that broker. So an exclusive right, that's what we're dealing with today. There's this other one, is an exclusive agency listing. Exclusive agency listing basically just says that you hire, there's one office. One broker is hired to sell the property, but if the seller finds his or her own buyer, then that broker is not compensated. So an exclusive agency listing, if the seller finds his or her own buyer, they don't have to compensate you. And then the third one, which I think, well, is called a non-exclusive listing or an open listing. The seller can hire multiple brokerages to sell his or her property, and whichever office brings forth the buyer is the office that gets the commission. If that seller finds his or her own buyer, then no one gets the commission. And I remember one day I was teaching, and there was a woman sitting in the front row, and she said, "Trent, that sounds like a hot mess." And so sometimes I just said, I call it a non-exclusive listing, AKA a hot mess, because that's exactly what it is. And I would never use it. I would never ask it. Well, I would never use it, but you could use it if you like. But let's talk about what we use, most of us, on exclusive right to sell listing. Let's take a look at the top of it, broker or the company. That is the name of your company. Make sure you write the full name of the company. Don't, if it's Remax first, don't put just Remax. The name of the company that's on the name that's on the license. Put the full name of the company on that, under the broker. They had to put company because years ago, I remember agents were writing the name of the broker. It's not the name. That's why they put company in parentheses, because broker could be the company, the brokerage, or broker could be the broker of record, the person who oversees the office. But this is the company. All right, put the company address, fax, you know that, fill all that out. The licensee, you put your name. One of the things you need to remember, if there's a co-listing agent, make sure you put that person's name, that person's information here too. If there are two people, don't just leave off the co-listing agent. If there are two of you who are listing this property, put both names in this listing contract and all the information. Sellers, make sure you put all the sellers on this contract. And I would make sure, well, let's say put sellers. Now, and you'll get a lot of times, you'll get estates. You'll get people who will come in and say, "Hey, I want to sell my property, but I'm the executor of my mother's estate." Most people, just to know, confuse executor and administrator, or executrix, administratrix, if it was a woman. If someone says to you, "I'm the executor and administrator of the estate," forget those terms, because most people misuse them. Just ask them, did your mother die with the will, or did your mother die without a will? That's what you want to know. And if they died with the will, you want a copy of that will, you want a copy of the death certificate, and you want the letters of testamentary. That is a document that names that executor or executrix. So you want those documents. So when someone says, "Hey," and the seller would be the estate of Mary Washington. That's how you would put in the listing contract. The estate of the person, the decedent, and ask again for the will, copy the death certificate, and letters of testamentary, because you want that executor or executrix to be named in that letter, in the letters of testamentary. If they tell you they died without a will, then you want letters of administration. You want them to give you a copy of the death certificate, obviously, and you want letters of administration, because the letters of administration will be the document that will appoint the administrator or the administratrix, if it's a woman. And I hate that word. So make sure, don't just take the word of someone who is calling you on the phone, who's coming in your office and saying, "I'm the executor or the executrix of my mother's estate or my grandmother's estate." I've seen that many times when people wrote up listing contracts under the impression that this person was the person who could sign this listing contract, and it turned out they were not the administrator or they were not the executor. They thought they should have been, but they were not. So just ask for that. Just be smart. Just be smart agents. Don't be so quick to take a listing and be sloppy. Take your time, do it right. The name of the game is to do it right, not fast. All right, and sloppy. Seller's mailing address. You want to know that, because if they don't own it, live in this property, at some point you may have to get in touch with the seller, get the seller's address. And if they're selling this house, you want to make sure you get a forwarding address at some point. the seller understands that this listing contract is between the broker and the seller. Why is that there? Because if you were to quit, this listing contract doesn't belong to you, it belongs to the company. So if you're with Weicker and you quit, that's nice, but you cannot take this listing contract with you unless the broker allows you to. All right. So sometimes sellers may, you quit and they say, well, okay, you're going to Remax from Weicker. And you say, well, all right, so then we'll just go there. No, you're not going there together. You're going to keep my listing stays with me unless I allow you to take it. There's a seller have a listing agreement or listing contract with this property with another broker. The answer should be no. If it's yes, that should be a red flag. There may be reasons why they have another listing contract, but let's say they signed another exclusive right to sell with another office. Well, this contract says they should only sign one, but let's say they have two. Well, that means they may be obligated to pay 2 commissions. So if someone says to you, yes, I have a listing contract with another brokerage, then you should talk to your broker. You should talk to your broker, and you should first of all find out why and get a copy of that contract. But if they have a contract, and especially another exclusive right to sell listing contract, you're not supposed to be in touch with that seller, because now you are interfering with exclusive representation of another agent's client. So that should be a red flag. If they say, yes, I'm under contract with someone else, that should stop this process, and you should probably get some guidance from your broker. Any questions, comments? I'd like to hear something. All right. At some point, someone will, I guess. All right. List price. Obviously, the list price. In this market, we're in the seller's market. We all know that. It's a great market for sellers, a horrible market for buyers. Now, one of the things that I always tell people, and they think is a good idea, when I negotiate with a seller, and I don't generally like to take overpriced listings, but in this market, you don't know what's overpriced. I've listed properties that I didn't think was selling for that price, and they sold for more. The comps were not there. The appraiser this is a really white hot market. And I think and I kind of wish it would cool off a little bit soon, but this is the time to negotiate a price reduction. I want you to think about this. A lot of people don't think about this. If I'm going to take, let's say you get an open, a listing, 400,000, it's a 350, 325, 350. Seller says, hey, let's try this. Is a great market. Maybe someone will give us 400 or close to it. This is a time where I would negotiate a price reduction. I would say, hey, I'll list it for 400, provided that we can reduce it in, and let's say 10 days to this price. That way, when 10 days comes around, you don't have to go back to that seller to try to convince them to reduce the price, because they've already negotiated. And on this date, if we're not under contract, then that price is reduced. You all like that idea? No one gonna say anything to me this whole time?
Yes, good idea.
Yes,
Good
that's a great idea, Trent.
All right, thank you, Cheryl. That's the only person I could hear, Cheryl.
Great idea, Trent.
I'm talking about some of the other people, not just GPAR people. Come on, some of you agents. Anybody else?
Trent, do we need one of those like applause signs or something?
Yes,
like that?
I would like that, because I'm feeling lonely here. I'm like, my God, is anybody listening? But
I think the background flooded out my thumbs up that I gave.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you. All right. So, and if you're going to do that, look at the back of the contract, and you'll see I would put that under additional terms. If you look at paragraph 33B, if you wanted to, that's where I would normally put it. If I say, hey, we're going to reduce the price to $375 on or before July 15th, if this property is not under contract or and so that's a good time to negotiate it. And I would even negotiate a second reduction. This is the time to negotiate it, because we all know, if you've been in this business longer than a day, sellers don't like to reduce the price. All right. So get this up now, have that discussion now, and it'll save you time and headaches later on when you got an overpriced listing that you can't sell, that you know is a 350, it's listed at 400, and you can easily sell it at 350. Now the seller decides, oh, let's just keep it at 400 for another 6 months before they fire you and hire somebody else. All right, property. Number one, property. Obviously, the address of the property, you need to put the municipality, the county. If you're in Philadelphia, it's not a problem, but make sure you put the right county. I've seen agents put Montgomery County when it was Delaware County. You just be careful. Make sure you put the right thing. The zoning classification. We know that if it's zone residential, you don't have to disclose that in agreement of sale. You have to put it here, but anytime there, but you still want the zoning classification, the right zoning classification listed in the listing contract, but a zoning classification does not have to be disclosed in agreement of sale as long as it's residential. If it's anything other than residential, it must be disclosed. If not, the buyer can void out the contract. Present use. How is that property being used? Maybe not, you can put just single family dwelling. Maybe it's a duplex, is a multi-family triplex, just whatever, however they're being used. And if it's being used illegally, you should disclose that. We all have seen properties where it was zoned as a single family is being used as a duplex. Well, that's an illegal use. You should disclose that it's zoned as a single family is being used as a multifamily. All right, because you have to disclose the zoning classification if it's anything other than single family. So you have to make sure that you disclose that illegal use. All right. The ID of the property, you simply pull that up in public records, you get the ID, and you just put that there. It's really simple. The second one, the starting date and end date. Starting date, when the contract, you can put a date there, or you can just start it whatever date you want in the future. Maybe I want to list it July 1st, but I sign a contract today, but it starts at 1st. If I don't put anything there, it starts a date that the last person signed. Then one thing that I really want to show is the ending date. Ending date could be the problem. Listing contracts cannot be more than 1 year long. They can have a listing contract cannot have an automatic renewal clause. It can't have a clause that asks you to cancel otherwise, but it renews, or give some type of 6-month termination date or something. Listing contracts cannot be more than 1 year. And you should, if you don't have a date here, I'm looking at the end date, paragraph 2C. If this contract does not have an end date, that contract may be void or unenforceable because it should have an end date in a contract. Make sure you put an end date. And I wouldn't put an end date like 3 months from today. I've seen that. 3 months from, well, I would put July 31st. Put a date. Don't 3 months, 45 days from the day. Another thing I would caution you to do, send this contract, or have the seller sign a listing contract first. Because when you sign it, because sometimes maybe you can't read the date that they signed it. I know the contract becomes legally binding when the last party signs it. So I'm going to be the last person to sign it because I don't know what date you signed it, Mr. Seller or Mrs. Seller. But I signed it today, which is the 25th, I think. So now we know this listing contract becomes effective on the 25th. Maybe if I sign it today and send it to the seller, and the seller signs in the 3 days, and I can't read what the date is, it may be an issue down the road when we try to determine when this contract ends. It's best just to have the seller sign, and when you sign, then you know the date it becomes effective. All right, that makes sense?
Yes.
All right. Now, dual agency. Of course, dual agency the Real Estate License and Registration Act requires that you disclose if you're working with both the buyer and the seller. The one thing you need when you're working with the buyer and the seller is what? What do you need from both the buyer and the seller? If you're going to work with both the buyer and the seller, you need what? Anybody? You need written consent. You need written consent from both the buyer and the seller when you are working with both. It's funny, just yesterday I got a contract. I saw but yes, you just need to make sure you have written consent, all right, from both the buyer and the seller. You cannot represent both parties in the same transaction with verbal consent. It has to be in writing. Otherwise, you cannot do it. So make sure when you're a dual agent, you have both parties need to agree to it, because not every seller and every buyer will agree to allow you to be a dual agent. Most of them will. I would say probably in all my years in this business, probably 2 or 3 times the seller says, I'd rather you not be a dual agent. I'd rather you not represent the buyer. I've had a buyer or two say, I'd rather you not represent the seller I mean, I'd rather not work with you if you represent the seller. And so most of the time there's not a problem, but there are some buyers and sellers view it as a conflict. A lot of states don't allow dual agency. I'm licensed, I have a broker's license in Florida. Florida does not allow dual agency. You cannot be, it's illegal to represent both buyer and seller in Florida as a dual agent. Designated agency. If your office practice designated agency, did I give you that single? Look at that single agency. You don't see the single agency form? Didn't I have that somewhere? If your office is not practice dual agency, then you should be using the single agency addendum. I'm assuming most offices probably do, but the single agency addendum is a form you would use if your office is not practice dual agency. It only practices single agency, which means you represent one party as opposed to dual agency where you represent both. All right. And the single agency just says broker does not represent buyer and seller in the same transaction. And the second one says buyer only represents buyers and sellers in the same transaction when separate designated licensees or salespeople are working with the buyer and the seller. So go back to designated agency. Designated agency is usually used as a way to avoid dual agency. If I'm a designated agent, designated agency has to, in order to be a designated agent, you must be in the same company and representing both. One agent is designated to represent a buyer, one agent is designated to represent seller in the same company. Broker is a dual agent, and those designated agents represent those respective parties exclusively. They cannot have conversations about anything the buyer tells them. They cannot have any conversation about what the seller said. The only person that designated agent can talk to, they can't talk to anybody else in the office about that buyer or that seller. The only person that it can have conversations with would be the broker, who would be the dual agent. So I see a lot of offices are going to designated agency to avoid dual agency. But so if you're not a designated agent or agency office, and you would just check that box on paragraph 4. All right, go to 5, brokerage
Can I ask
fee.
a question?
Yes.
So with the dual agency, once the buyer and the seller signs the
Yes.
agreement of sale, that's not written consent.
Say that again.
So once the buyer and the seller signs the agreement of sale as a dual agent, you know how you have to check off which relationship?
Right.
Are you saying you need
Right.
separate written notification?
I would not, listen, I would not accept that as dual agency. No. I mean, maybe where's the written consent? Just because you remember, and some people do. I'm not going to say if someone sold you, if your broker tells you do it differently, you follow your broker lead. I would simply type, and let me just read. I saw this just the other day, and I like this. I usually have a form that they sign, but this one wrote under additional terms in the agreement of sale, and it says both seller and buyer have read the terms and agreed to and are aware that this realtor will serve as dual agent representing both parties in the transaction. They just typed that, and I like that. They typed that in the under additional terms. Just keep in mind, adding a sentence or 2 sentences in the agreement of sale or using a form that says I'm representing both parties and let them sign will not hurt you, because you never want, this is how I've always thought about this business. I don't want to do anything that could bring somebody back later to say, I didn't know. I didn't know that you represented both the buyer and the seller. If I knew you represent the seller, I would have hired you. I believe you do whatever you can to protect yourself and your brokerage. So adding one little extra paragraph or sentence or a couple of sentences, that's only 2 sentences that agent added to the contract. I have a separate form that I require buyer and seller to sign that says that that this agent is representing both parties. That answer your question?
It does, but I'm in the middle of a dual agency now, and that's why I'm like, oh my God, I didn't do that.
But it's not too late. It's not
Okay.
too late to do a form that says I represent both and have them sign it.
Here's what I also did just to add more protection for myself. On the consumer notice to each, the buyer and the seller, I highlighted dual agency on there. And I explained that's my relationship when they signed it. So is that okay?
It wouldn't be for me. I'm a broker. I would not accept that. But keep in mind this, go back to what I said. do you want one of these parties to later come back and say, I didn't know I was a dual agent?
No.
Just spell it out. Protect yourself. Just spell. It's not too late to get on your computer and write out something that says, I represent both parties. Get an addendum and have them both sign. They're going to sign it. It's not a problem, but protect yourself.
I'll do that. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. All right, go back.
Step
Yeah.
away for like 2 seconds. Are you saying to put that little clause in additional terms up front during the initial listing, on the initial listing?
No, in the agreement of sale. What I read was in an agreement of sale.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, I would do that if when I'm writing up the agreement of sale, I would put that in there. Or I would have a separate form where both the buyer and seller sign. But I actually just got this yesterday, and I actually like that better. I actually like the fact that he just put in there that he represents both under additional terms. I actually think that's easier than the way I do it. That's why I say I'm always open to something, to a different way of doing something.
Great, thank you.
All right, broker's fee. Broker's fee, obviously broker's fee is something that is between you and your broker. And the broker determines the fee. Fees cannot be set, as I said, by multi-list, by GPAR, the NAR. It is the fees are set by your office. Your office can charge 10%. They can charge 20% on each deal. They can charge 1%. Whatever they charge is up to them. The only thing that broker cannot do is have a conversation about fees with another brokerage, because then you engage in antitrust violations. So don't ever question why a broker is charging what he or she is charging. They can charge whatever they want for their office, as long as they don't have communication with another broker about fees. All right. So whatever they charge is their business. All right, let's take a look at this. It says that, and it says no association of realtors are set or recommend the broker's fee. Broker and seller negotiate the fee that the seller would pay. And B5B says broker's fee is, let me just say 8%. Let me just put 8% of the sales price, or let's say 20%, whichever is greater. And if there are any other fees, you put there. If there's nothing else, put NA. Don't ever leave blanks in a contract. When there's a blank in the contract, I don't know if you meant to leave it blank or you forgot to fill it in. So it's always best when you have a contract to put NA if it's blank, if it doesn't apply. But let's say, so broker, so I'm gonna go back, I just wrote in broker's fee is 8%. Of course, I'm just making that up. Of the sales price of $20,000, which is greater, and NA paid to the broker by seller as follows. And then if you look at B1, this is blank. This amount of the broker's fee is earned and due, is non-refundable at the signing of the listing contract. That is what we just call an upfront fee. Some offices charge an upfront fee to clients. That again, that's a broker decision. I don't do that, but that doesn't mean it's not, your office may do it, but that is an upfront fee. You have to disclose that. If you don't charge an upfront fee, then you should just put NA there. But one of the things that you need to remember with this, if you charge an upfront fee, that fee is part of the total broker's fee, is not in addition to it. In other words, if you use my example of 8% or 20,000, whichever is higher, let's say 20,000 is higher, and you charge an upfront fee of 2,000, then the broker, that seller owes you an additional 18,000 at settlement. They would not owe you another 20. That upfront fee is in addition to, is part of the broker's fee, not in addition to it. All right, any questions? So if you talk about the fee, one says you can charge an upfront fee. Well, let's go back to the first one. Says, let's use 20,000 is the total fee. It says that you can take an upfront fee, which will be deducted from the upfront fee. So again, if I charge 20,000 and you gave me a $2,000 non-refundable upfront fee, then I owe 18. And how can that other 18 be paid to the seller? Go to paragraph 2. Seller would pay the balance, because the balance would be 18,000. Seller would pay the balance of the broker's fee if the property is sold during, we talked about that already, if it's sold by anybody during the term of this contract, then the seller would owe that broker an additional 18,000. If 2B, if a ready, willing, and able buyer is found, a willing buyer is one who would pay the listed price or more for the property, or one who has submitted an offer that's been accepted by the seller. If the seller accepts an offer, then the seller owes a commission. C, if negotiations are pending at the end of the contract. D, if a seller signs an agreement to sell, then changes his or her, is unable to sell the property because failing to do all the things required. Well, if the seller doesn't do what the seller needs to do, because and now the deal falls apart, you still are entitled to the commission. E, if the property, if part of the property, D, if a seller refuses to sell the property, signs a contract, and then changes his or her mind. So you know what? I decided not to sell. Well, the buyer can obviously sue for specific performance, but the seller owes you a commission if the seller, and I've had sellers decide they just don't want to sell. Well, I say, well, that's fine, but make sure you send me a check because I've earned the commission. You can't just change. I said, then there are other ramifications or consequences that you change your mind. This person changes mine back. But because I'm sure there'll be a lawsuit probably coming from a buyer, but there'll definitely be a lawsuit coming from me. And so we got that together. All right. E, a property or any part of it is taken by the government for eminent domain. If the government comes, if Philadelphia comes in, takes part of your property or takes it all for eminent domain because they want to build a park, and you get money, you still have to pay that portion, that $18,000 to me. I'm still entitled to my commission, even though the state or the city or the federal government took your property by way of eminent domain. If you were paid, you must compensate. If you were compensated, you must pay the balance of that broker fee. And then F is what we call a broker protection clause. That's that a sale occurs. If a broker's fee is earned, if a sale occurs after the end date of this contract, look at that one, the sale occurs within blank days of the end of the contract. You can put whatever you want. You can have 30 days in there, 60 days, 90 days, whatever your policy is in your office. But let's just read it as 30 days. The sale occurs within 30 days of the sale. So even though the contract ended today, if that sale occurs within the next 30 days, then my broker's fee or my commission is still earned. 2, the buyer was shown or negotiated to buy the property during the term of the contract. And so if and that property is not listed with another office. Now, that's important. You see that it says, even if that seller goes to another office and signs another exclusive, your property, let's say your contract ends today, tomorrow, that seller goes to a different office, signs a new exclusive right to sell contract, then you would not be entitled to a commission. Only if that seller is not under another contract with a different office. All right. And then C tells you when you get paid. Because you really have earned the commission. If you go back up to B, you've earned the commission when you find a ready, willing, and able buyer. But when did we get paid? Kind of the custom is, look at C. If a sale occurs, balance of the broker's fee will be paid upon delivery of the deed. So when is the deed delivered? At settlement. So you will earn your commission. You've earned it, but it will not be paid until that deed is delivered to that buyer. Any questions? Look at 6, paragraph 6, the buyer's fee, the broker's fee of settlement does not occur. Again, your office may have a policy as to what you put there. It says, if an agreement of sale is signed and settlement does not occur, and deposit monies are released to the seller, so the buyer defaults, and the seller gets the money, then how much of it do you get? Does your office get? Well, you may put, some offices have 100%, some offices have 50%, but that's not negotiable. I've had sellers who say, I want it all. I say, well, that's nice, but you can negotiate whatever you want it to be. Your office may have a policy that's 50-50 or 75-25, but that's something that you have to, or maybe your office allows you to decide how much. But just keep in mind, if this deal dies, you've done some work, and now the seller gets $10,000 and you get nothing, you probably want to get some money for your work. So just be mindful of that. All right, and 7, cooperation with other brokers. If I'm going to cooperate with another office, how am I paying them? How much do they get? Let's look at B. If you represent a buyer, if there's a buyer agent, the broker would pay blank of the sales price. A buyer's agent, even if compensated by the broker, will represent the interest of the buyer. Make sure you don't put a number or percentage in that line. Don't put negotiable or a question mark, because And you need to be, and I'm sure agents who've been around a while know some agents who have done this. They say 3% there, but in MLS, they put 2%. Well, you need to put whatever you put here needs to be what you put in MLS. If the seller is agreeing to share, let's say it's a total, let's go with 8% again. It's 8% commission. And you put here that if a buyer, if another office, a co-op brings a offer and we accept it, then we will share that commission. We will give 4% of that commission to the co-op. Then that 4% needs to go in MLS. That is a commission that will be paid to the buyer agent. It should not be 3% or 2.5%. Some agents, and they do this, they're just wrong. They may have a 4% commission that they're going to share, but they put 2.5 or 3 to see how you behave. And then right before settlement, they're to say, oh, you know what, Trent, I'm going to give you 4%. I said, well, that's nice, because the contract says you're supposed to give me 4% anyhow, but that's another story. So don't do that. That's just sleazy anyhow. All right, let's talk. So make sure you put a real number in there, and it should match with whatever you put in MLS. Don't fudge that. Don't put, well, I need to get more. The duties of the broker and the seller. What do you owe the seller? The broker is acting as a seller's agent to market the property and to negotiate with the potential buyers. Broker will use reasonable efforts to find a buyer for the property. And the seller will cooperate with broker to assist in the sale of the property. I'll go to D. If the property is rented, seller will give any leases to the broker before signing his contract. Make sure you get leases up front. Make sure you know, and if there are no releases, you need to get what they call a memorandum of lease. You need to have the seller write out what the terms of that lease agreement is. Maybe a month, you want the seller to say, okay, the lease started whether the month, the tenant pays $1,000 a month. The tenant put down a security deposit of $800. The utilities are all utilities are paid by the landlord, but the whatever the terms are. If you don't have a lease, make sure your seller writes that out and signs it, because that's going to then be turned over to the buyer's agent, because the buyer's agent, the new buyer, needs to know what are the terms of this lease, or this lease agreement, or this tenancy. All right. I like to get leases up front when I sign this contract, so I know exactly what's going on. The other one says, E says that the seller will not enter into any new leases. This, and you need to make sure a seller knows this. If you're selling a multifamily property, let that seller know you can't enter into, and it says exactly 8E, seller will not enter into renew or modify any leases or enter into any option to sell during the term of this contract without the broker's written consent. So the broker needs to give consent for that seller or seller/landlord to renew a lease, to enter into a new lease, because if it's under contract, then maybe the new buyer wants to live in one of the units, and you don't want that seller to go and rent out that unit when in fact I was going to move there. And if I'm getting an FHA loan, I need to live in one of those units. So you can really mess it up. So make sure sellers know, don't do anything without my written consent as far as lease renewal or signing new leases. Any questions, comments? How are we doing so far? I guess not that great if nobody says anything.
Great.
You all learning anything?
Early on a Friday, I'm soaking it all in, Trent.
Well, thank you. Anybody else? No, nobody else. All right.
I'm here too, Trent.
Who is this? Eve. Hi, Eve.
Yeah.
You learn anything, Eve?
I'm learning a couple of things.
Okay. Well, you've been around a long time. So anytime an experienced agent learns something, that's a good thing, right? That's a good thing. All right. Take a look at paragraph 9. Broker service a buyer. Broker may accept services, may provide services to a buyer for which broker may accept a fee. This is just anytime you do anything where you are compensated, you need to disclose it to the seller. If you're doing something with a buyer may not be your client, but let's say you order this, even though you order something, I don't know, I wanted to say the city cert, but the buyer, let's say the buyer is responsible for ordering the city cert. according to the agreement sale, you order it for the buyer, you charge the buyer a fee, even though the buyer is not your client, but you just need to disclose any fees that you may get from the buyer if you represent the seller. That's all that means. Number 10, broker not responsible for damages. And this is one I make sure I spend a little bit of time on with the seller. Seller agrees that broker and broker's licensees are not responsible for any damage to the property, or any loss or theft or personal goods, theft of personal goods from the property, unless damage, loss, or theft is solely and directly caused by the broker or the broker's licensees. I tell sellers, I would like you to get rid of all your expensive jewelry and all you need to get that. You shouldn't have a diamond ring sitting on the nightstand. If it's get rid of it, get a safe, do something and put all your valuables there, because people are coming in and out. I know a lot of people have videos, but still, if someone steals anything from that house, you're not responsible. And a seller will be angry if somebody stole and they want to blame you. So you need to point out that I need you to get rid of stuff. All right. I need you not to get rid of, I need you to put things away. Buy a safe or whatever you need to do, but you shouldn't have valuables. You shouldn't have a lot. I went into a listing once and the man must have had about maybe $3,000 sitting in his bedroom. It was all $100 bills. I just thought, I mean, it's just, you would not want that sitting there while people are coming in and out. And now, obviously, if your agent, you went in there and stole the money, you would be responsible. The broker could be responsible. But if somebody else, if one of the clients or somebody you took in stole it, you didn't know, that seller cannot hold you responsible. So let them know.
Hey, Trent.
Yes.
Does that count even with like an open house? So if you have an agent that's actually standing there and someone steals something from the property?
I would, well, if I were doing an open house, I have that conversation and I have them sign something that says to this effect. So for me, yes. If you don't have something, you need to have that discussion. And I would have the seller, and that's a good point. If you're doing an open house, I would have the seller sign something that says that I'm not responsible for the theft, or unless I create it, unless I cause the theft. I would just kind of use this same paragraph so they understand, and let them sign that and hold you harmless.
Okay.
Actually, I think that's a good point with an open house. I never thought of that.
Yeah. Just because you have an agent physically sitting there.
Exactly. And that agent is not going upstairs. That agent's not going in the basement. You've got all these people in and out. Someone could, but again, I tell all my clients to remove all values.
Yeah, put stuff in the safe or don't have it in the house.
Exactly. Don't have it in the house. All right. Deposit monies, paragraph 11. First of all, if there is a co-op involved and the buyer gives you a check, they make it payable not to your office, they'll make it payable to the seller's office, to the selling broker, because that's who holds it in his or her escrow. But make sure you're required to use a deposit money notice. You all know that form. If this is a requirement, if your buyer is giving you a check, even though that check's going to be transferred to another office, which it would be, you need to have a deposit money notice so that buyer knows which office is holding his or her money. Always give a deposit money notice. Sometimes buyers agents don't think it's a big deal, but that's the law, that it is a requirement that if a buyer is giving you, the buyer's agent, a check and is made payable to a different office, and you're going to turn that check over to that office, that buyer needs to know exactly where that check is going. All right. And deposit monies. It says broker would keep deposit. Obviously, the broker has to keep the deposit monies in an escrow account. We all know that. Here's a key that I want you to see, where it goes down. It says buyer and seller may name a non-licensee as the escrow holder. In other words, maybe a title company. We're seeing that happen more and more. Maybe a title company is the escrow holder, or maybe an attorney is because the attorney can hold that money in escrow, a title company. But keep in mind, look at that. It says buyer and seller may name a non-licensee as the escrow holder, in which case an escrow holder will be bound by the terms of the escrow agreement, if any, not by the Real Estate License and Registration Act. In other words, what brokers are held to has to keep monies in an escrow account according to the Real Estate License Registration Act and the Pennsylvania rules and the Pennsylvania Real Estate Commission's rules and regulations. But a title company does not. They're not bound by those, by the licensing law or the Pennsylvania Real Estate Commission. So make sure if a title company or an attorney is holding that money, that you have an escrow agreement and it spells out what happens if there's a conflict. What happens if there's a default? What happens to that money? Does the title company or the lawyer decide what happens? I would be clear. You make sure, don't just think, okay, the title company is holding it. Make sure you understand what happens. Always think worst case scenario. What happens if there is a dispute over the entitlement of the escrow money? What does the title company do? Well, the title company may do something different according to the escrow agreement. Well, we know what a broker must do. A broker cannot release that money unless, and you can look at that. Let's go to B. Brokers says, regardless of their parent entitlement deposit monies, no matter who is entitled to it, Pennsylvania law does not allow a broker holding that deposit money to determine who's entitled to it. The only way that broker can release money, and even if the buyer is 100% wrong, the broker can't determine that. Look at the first one. It says, if an agreement of sale is terminated prior to settlement and no dispute over entitlement to the deposit money, then that broker can, a written agreement signed by both parties is evidence that there's no dispute. So if there's no issue and both the buyer and seller agree that the buyer is entitled to the escrow money, obviously the broker can release it to the buyer. Number two, it says, if after the broker has received deposit monies, the broker receives a written agreement that is signed by the broker and buyer directing how to distribute. That's basically the same thing that I just read some different. A written agreement signed about evidence of dispute. Oh, it seems like almost the same thing. According to the terms of final court order, if they went to court, a court says this is how that money is to be distributed. That's how that money is to be distributed by the broker. And 4, according to the terms of a prior written agreement. And that prior written agreement is in paragraph 26 of the agreement of sale. Remember that paragraph that says what happens if within a certain number of days the seller does not initiate mediation or litigation, then that buyer can ask that broker to return his or her money, and that broker must do it. So that would be that prior agreement that's in the agreement of sale. Paragraph 26C, I think it is. Any questions? Any comments? Paragraph 12, other properties. Seller agrees that the broker may list other properties for sale and that broker may show and sell other properties to prospective buyers. Well, obviously, that a lot of times when I see this, I'm actually saying that makes no sense until I had a seller who thought when I was listed, I listed her property and I listed another property a block away, and she thought that I shouldn't have listed the other property because it competes with her property. And that's when I realized why this statement's here, because you will come across every now and then a seller who thinks that you should not be listing other properties or showing other properties in the neighborhood if theirs is on the market. You should be trying to push theirs and not selling another. So clearly an agent can show and sell other properties even though they have listed your property, the seller's property, for sale. All right, number 13, additional offers. This is something that NAR requires. The NAR Code of Ethics requires that, and some agents still don't know this. If a buyer's agent, even a buyer, calls you and says, hey, Anastasia, do you have an offer on this property? Well, unless the seller directed Anastasia not to disclose that information, Anastasia must tell me whether or not there is an offer on that property. And she must also say who that offer is from. Is it from her? Is it from one of another salesperson in her office? Is it from a salesperson in a different office? She must disclose that to me if I ask her. Unless, the only time she doesn't have to disclose that if the seller directs her not to. All right, and any questions? But once, and that last paragraph is in caps, because I've had this happen too, where it says, once seller enters into an agreement of sale, broker is not required to present other offers. I've had people send me offers after an agreement of sale has been signed. And the seller says, I want you to bring me those offers. Just if that ever happens to you, you should the NAR Code of Ethics requires that you tell this seller to seek legal advice, because if you are accepting an offer after you've already signed one and you're going to try to get out of that first one because the second one's better, there may be some legal ramifications. You don't want to be involved in that. So you need to tell them before you do anything. If you're directing me to give you offers, present you offers after one's been sold, accepted by you, then you need to seek legal advice, because there will be problems. And I've seen sellers, and we've all seen that, where another offer comes in or somebody says, hey, I'll offer you more for that property if you can get out of the first one. And so now the seller's doing his or her best to terminate this. Another offer comes in. If you're involved in that transaction, you need to say, hey, seller, you need to seek legal advice, because you're under contract with this buyer. And if you're trying to undo this original contract to substitute it for this one, then there are issues. And you need to talk to an attorney to figure out what the consequences and what the issues are, because there will be some ramifications. So you need to seek legal advice if a seller is asking to do that. All right. Any questions?
Because a lot of times people will have an MLS active under contract,
Which is
and
wrong. Right.
I don't understand why people do that, because we're still showing these properties, and if we do make it, and I always call the agent first and I say, I see that it's active under contract. Can you tell me what's going on there?
Exactly.
What it may fall apart? And, should we really consider this, to be an option for us? And a lot of times they'll say, oh, well, it just went under contract yesterday, but, we just still want to show it. Why?
Why? But you should, first of all, Anastasia, the trend required, that's a wrong designation. It's not active on the contract. That is pending. Because active on the contract means the seller has an out. If an out does not mean the home inspection is not done and the buyer can back out. It has if there is an escape clause, or that, but when they put active on the contract, 90% of agents put it in as active on the contract when it should be pending. I would not ever show an active on the contract property.
Yeah, I don't do it. I usually call and I get that dumb answer every time. So I
would tell you, every time I've ever called, I get the same dumb answer. I do not sell, because I would tell my client this property is under contract. I don't know what active under contract is, because they use it the wrong way, because they will give you that same, as you say, dumb answer. And I would agree. So active under contract, I don't show. They should be in MLS as pending, not active under contract. And they should not be shown, because a seller, and again, that's what goes back to accepting a good dude. So now you've already signed the contract. Now you get another one. I wouldn't do that, but those agents should, according to NAR, they must direct that seller. They should tell that seller to seek legal advice, because there are some problems with that. So now they've got two contracts. What do you do with two contracts? And now, so what are you trying to get out of the first so you can get more money from the second? It's a problem. And if you don't ever do that, anyone, don't do that. If it's pending, put it as pending. If it's active on the contract or something totally different, then you use that, but you should be using pending, not active on the contract. Number 14, paragraph 14, seller will reveal defects and environmental hazards. Seller is required, of course, to fill out the seller's disclosure. Just so you all know, the seller's disclosure as of July 1st, there are changes made to the seller's disclosures. Actually, better. They're making better changes. You can go on and take a look at it. One of the things they did was they put those boxes on the right-hand side, which I never understood why they were on the left, because so they made it better. And the only change, they added a paragraph for pools, spas, and hot tubs, but they did improve on the seller's disclosure. Make sure that if you are, well, let's say it goes back to 14, paragraph 14 says seller, including the seller's exempt from the real estate disclosure law will disclose all known material defects and or environmental hazards on a separate disclosure statement. Let me just say this to you, because this is something I bet you anybody who's been doing this real estate for a little bit will see this. You'll get a seller disclosure with X's through every page because they'll say, I'm an executor, so I don't have to fill it out. Well, being an executor or an administrator, that's one of the exemptions. There are 10 exemptions to the seller's disclosure. There are 10 people who don't have to fill one out. However, if you are, and this is something that I see all the time, and I have the seller's disclosure here. This you want to know. If you represent the seller, if you represent an estate where there is an executor involved or an administrator involved, if you know something about that property as executor or administrator, you need to disclose it. For instance, let's say it was your mother's property. You're the executor or the executrix of the estate. And before your mother died, the roof was leaking and you had it repaired or you had it replaced. Well, that's information, that's a material defect. That's information that you, the executor or administrator, know. So you need to disclose that. You can't just say, oh, well, I'm the executor, so I don't have to disclose anything. I don't have to fill this out. You are required to fill out what you know. And I just want you to read this one box. And if you look at the seller's disclosure, there's a box that says executor, administrator, trustee, signature block. And it reads as follows. According to the provisions of the real estate seller disclosure law, the undersigned executor, administrator, or trustee is not required to fill out a seller disclosure statement because they're exempt. The next sentence is the key. The executor, administrator, or trustee must, however, disclose any known material defects of the property. You still must disclose defects that you are aware of. Just keep that in mind. Any questions? So if you represent the state and that person knows something, they still must disclose it. All right. And also, we also know one thing I tell sellers with the seller disclosure is that take your time. I never believe you should sit there while they fill it out. Give them a few days because there's a lot of stuff. Tell them if they don't know something, they don't know, but you cannot help. You cannot help a seller complete a seller's disclosure. I'll say that again. You cannot help them in any way fill this out. This is information that they have to disclose. It's not information that you disclose. You're not the person who's going around the house to say, hey, I see this and I see that. It is not up to you. If you know that they put misinformation or they left something out, then you need to point that out. But a seller must fill this out. I tell agents, don't even handle it. Use gloves so your fingerprints aren't even on it. Because if there's a lawsuit in real estate, oftentimes it comes because a seller may not have disclosed information they were supposed to, or they simply lied. So make sure a seller understands that seller's disclosure is important. Take the time. And if they don't know if they should disclose something, the answer is always disclose it. No one's ever been sued for disclosing too much information, but people have been sued for disclosing too little. So I tell my sellers, if you think it's important, disclose it. Period. That's it. No one's gonna get you for putting too much. They may say, oh, that's irrelevant. That I didn't need to know. Well, fine. But you have it, but I don't want you to come back and say my seller gave you too little information. Give more rather than less. All right. But do not make sure they treat that form. And to me, that's the most important form in real estate. And when we do the agreement sale, we're going to talk more about that. But go back to paragraph 14, where it says, 14B, it says seller will update the seller disclosure as necessary throughout the term of the listing contract. Well, if something changes, let's say the roof was good when you signed it, when the seller filled out the seller's disclosure, when now it's leaking. Well, the seller needs to update that because that's a defect, that's a defect. Well, there is an addendum that you can use without having to go change the seller's disclosure. There is a, I thought I had it here. There is an addendum you could just get. I don't know where it is. There is an addendum, a seller's disclosure addendum. It's just one page, as opposed to redoing the whole seller's disclosure. Just go to Zip Forms and get the seller's disclosure addendum. And you just say, okay, in section 14, the roof is leaking, the seller had it repaired, or the seller put on a new roof. And so update the seller's disclosure as it needs to be updated. All right. Don't just assume because it was a roof, don't just take that seller's disclosure and now things have changed. Make sure you let the new buyer know, or that potential buyer know, that there are some changes to this document. So it should be updated throughout the term of this contract. All right, and it says 2, and this is something I point out to sellers, seller will protect the broker and the licensees from any claims, lawsuits, and actions that result. So if you, well, let's go to C. It says if seller fails to disclose known material defects and or environmental hazards like radon or mold, it says 1, the seller will now hold broker or licensee responsible. You're not, if you lie on this seller's disclosure, you're saying you're not going to hold me responsible. 2 says that you will protect the buyer and the licensee from any claims, lawsuits, and actions that result. So if you're sued as a result of not filling this out completely, you're protecting me. And the 3rd says that you're going to pay my attorney's fees. Says the seller will pay all the brokers and licensees costs that result. So if I'm included in that lawsuit because of something you failed to do, then you are paying my attorney's fees. Make sure you point that out to a seller, that how important this seller's disclosure is. And if you mess up and you get sued, you are responsible for my legal costs. Any questions or comments? How about 15, paragraph 15? If the property is built before 1978, we know that you need to provide to protect your family from lead. And you all have that. You can see that, you know, in zip form. You need, if it's built before 1978, the seller needs to fill out a lead, the residential lead-based paint addendum, and a seller must disclose anything they know about lead or any lead hazards. If they have reports, if they've done any tests, they have reports, that stuff must be turned over to a buyer. All right, and if you say, look at the last paragraph. One thing that you just need to remember with a property built before 1978 is sellers don't ever, well, I think they wrote it, they said it better. Look at the last line under paragraph 15. It says the act does not require the seller to inspect for lead-based hazards or to correct lead-based hazards on the property. The act does not apply to housing built before 1978. So the only thing you have to do if you're a seller is disclose. That's the key word. The only thing you have to do is disclose the presence of lead-based hazard. You don't have to correct it. You don't have to repair it. You just have to disclose it. Seller's not obligated to do anything outside of disclosing. Any questions or comments? All right, paragraph 16, home warranties. Seller may purchase a home warranty for the property. Only thing this is showing is that some warranty companies will give money to that office or to that broker if they issue a warranty. So it just needs to be disclosed that that broker is receiving compensation for a warranty that is issued on behalf of an issue. So if I'm saying to a seller, I think you should get a home warranty, which I think is a great idea, and you agree, that office may be compensated. That's all. And if you see that, it says a seller may purchase a home warranty for the property. Last paragraph says seller understands that the broker who recommends a home warranty company of warranty may have a business relationship with the home warranty company that provides a financial benefit to the broker. So you always have to disclose anytime you are getting money for doing the sale of this property. All right, recording of the property. Let me see something. Seller understands that buyers viewing this property, and this is something that I'm still working through, because now a lot of properties you go in, they have videos, seller understands that potential buyers viewing the property may engage in photography, videography on the property. Seller should remove, we talked about this already, any items of a personal nature seller does not wish to have photographed or recorded, such as family photographs, important or confidential paperwork. B says, any person who intentionally intercepts oral communications by electronic or other means without the consent of all parties is guilty of a felony under Pennsylvania law. Seller understands that recorded or transmitted audio may result in violation of state or federal wiretapping law. So make sure if your seller is listening, I just saw something, in listening on conversations, that they have the consent. Now, I just saw this. I just listed, let me find it. I just listed a property this week. I was doing some comps and I found, I found something on the next block. And in the MLS, it said this, because you could just, I thought this is kind of smart. He has disclosure. It says this property, the properties are under live video and audio surveillance. All access and showings are recorded and monitored remotely. By entering the property, you give automatic consent to be recorded and monitored with both video and audio. So you're saying, so he's telling you, if you would listen, I don't know why you would be listening. I would have a problem with, I don't know why you'd be listening to the conversation, but you consenting, you giving your consent, because without your consent, that seller or that broker could be guilty of wiretapping. Or, so don't record people without their knowledge, or don't record people and don't listen in on people's conversations without their consent. I think that disclosure is good. So you're going in there thinking, knowing that you're being recorded and your conversations may be listened to. I'm of the opinion now, if I show a property, I ask buyers not to speak. I just say, don't speak in the house. Make notes, because I think too many people are listening on conversations. I've gone to too many houses where cameras are everywhere, and I believe that they're listening. They're not disclosing it. So I just tell buyers, don't speak. Wait till we get outside.
Trent, is that something that we could maybe put in that additional terms box when we're doing the listing agreement? Like if they're already going to do that, because if we're scheduling open houses, and then I feel like that allows us to, we can put that in the either in the agent comments or in the public comments.
I agree. Yes, I would say yes.
Our part to disclose as well.
I would put that in. This is an MLS. He discloses this in MLS, this agent. So when you set up the showing, it says on the agent remarks that you're being recorded, you're being audio, you're being videotaped, your conversation is being listened to. For the life of me, I don't understand why they're listening to your conversations. I understand the video, but why are they listening? I don't understand that. That's just weird to me. But that's why I don't speak in houses now. I stopped that more than a year ago, probably a couple of years ago, because I think I was in a house, and as soon as I felt that they were listening on our conversation, and I was in a house and the buyer said, let's make an offer of a certain price. And the agent called me back probably 15 minutes and said, we'll take the exact number that she said in that house. And it was a weird number. It was like, $212,500, something like that. And he said, well, the seller's willing to take no lower than $212,500. So I'm like, well, how did he know that number? Because I believe they were listening on our conversation. So I stopped having conversations after that.
Wow.
Just be mindful of that. People are watching you and they're listening. And and I'm sure most of them are not disclosing to you that they're listening to you. All right. Let's go to paragraph 12. Where are we? Paragraph recorded. No, I'm sorry. 18. Paragraph recovery fund. Of course, this is required, both the Real Estate License Registration Act and the rules and regulations of Pennsylvania Real Estate Commission requires that all of our documents have information about the recovery fund. And of course, the recovery fund is set up to compensate folks who licensee or salesperson defrauded in a real estate transaction. It's just is a way for them to be able to go and collect money from the fund. If they get a civil judgment against you and they cannot collect from you, they can collect from the real estate recovery fund, up to $20,000 per licensee. Each licensee, the state can pay up to a total of $100,000. If they ever pay out in the real estate recovery fund, your license is automatically suspended as of the day they pay any money to a client or to a customer. And then you, in order to get your license back, you must pay back everything they paid out, plus 10% interest per year. Number 19, notice that persons offering to sell or rent housing in Pennsylvania, federal, and this is clear. I mean, you just don't do this. Federal and state law makes it illegal for sellers, a broker, or anyone else to use race, color, religion, religious creed, sex, disability, familial status, age, national origin, disability. Don't discriminate. Don't take a listing where a seller is telling you they want a certain person. I have had it happen, and I tell you, it happens often with children. People still think that it's okay to discriminate against families with children. We do a lot of property management. I can't tell you how many. I had one woman who's a judge right now who told me, Trent, I don't want children on the second floor. It was a duplex. And I said to her, well, you know, that's a violation of fair housing. And she said, well, I know, but you know, but the person downstairs is an older man. If you put children, I said, I don't care how you say it. You're a judge. I said, you know better. That's a violation of Fair Housing Act. It's a violation of on the state level, on the federal level, is a violation, period. And you can go to federal prison. I will not ever, if the person qualifies, they will be put in that unit. Period. That's it. Not if you want me, if you're telling me you want me to discriminate, you need to tell me because I'm gonna back out. And she said, no, I'm wrong. You're right. You're right. And the person who got approved was a single woman with a child. And one of the things that we did, because there's so much discrimination when it comes to families with children, I can tell you that we had to change our practice. Well, I can tell you why we changed it. Years ago, we had a woman who, she was a Muslim. She was in full Muslim garb. She had great credit. She worked for the city for about 15 years. She was in an apartment, but the seller was selling it. And he said, this is the best tenant I've ever had, never late, wonderful. She had, I think, 1 or 2 young children. So we put her, she applies for this place. And the landlord said she wanted to meet the woman. And we had no problem with this landlord's meeting a prospective tenant. But I didn't realize at the time that a lot of people were meeting to see what you look like. Okay, and to see whether you had children, or see whether you were in Muslim garb, or to see other things about you, or to see if you may be gay or lesbian or Jewish. I mean, it's amazing. I never thought that because I don't discriminate. Well, she called and said, I don't want to take this woman. And I said, well, why not? She had a credit score of over 800. She made about, and this was probably 15 years ago, made about 75,000, worked for the city for 10, 12 years, never late with her rent. And I said, well, why would you not want her? It seems like she'd be a great tenant. And as I questioned it, I didn't think about it. And I'm like, and she said, well, I couldn't see her eyes. And I said, huh? She said, well, I couldn't see her eyes because she was in full Muslim garb. And she said, I don't trust the person. I really can't see that face. And I pushed it more. And I'm like, oh, and I would rather have I'd rather have a Christian, but Muslims are okay. And that's where I realized that you discriminate against this woman. So I said to her, if you either take this woman or I report you. I said, simple, what do you want? And I said, I won't do it in the dark at night. I won't do it. I'm telling you, I'm going to turn you in. And so you either take her, I will tell her that you were approved, and this landlord, my client, did not approve you. And I will turn you in. And she was a principal in high school. And she said, I did. She took her. And it's funny because we've done lots of business with this woman, and she tells everybody, well, when you call Trent, make sure you don't discriminate. Make sure you take anybody who's qualified. But one of the things we did after that, we changed our policy. So now landlords cannot meet a tenant until after the lease is signed. We sign the lease on behalf of the landlord, and you get to meet them afterwards, so that you cannot discriminate, because if they approve, they meet all the qualifications, they approve whether you want to or not. So we don't allow a landlord to meet a tenant, and that now eliminates that level of discrimination. All right. Any comments, questions, anything?
That was great, Trent. I'm always I need to go back and read our office policy. So I don't know what our practice is, to be honest. I just always try to do my best to do what's right. But it's good when brokerages are taking things, you didn't realize it at first, and then now it's something to be taken into consideration, and then you made it a part of your office policy.
Yep. And we've not had a problem because you don't get to meet them. And they ask us anything about them. Did they have children? We say, well, we'll give you all the information you need after we sign the lease. Because the only thing we're concerned with, are they qualified? You don't need to know the race, the gender, how many children. We don't need to know. All you need to know, does this person meet the qualifications? If this person meets the qualifications, they're in. That's it. We're not giving you any information. If we have qualifications, we say they meet the credit criteria, they meet the income criteria, they meet every criteria that's on the list. That is it. You'll know all about them. We'll give you anything you need to know about them once we sign a lease. Feel free to go meet them. All right. But don't take a listen where discrimination, where you know a seller wants you to practice discrimination, because you will go to prison with that seller. All right. Don't do it. No amount of money is worth your liberty. All right. Your liberty being stripped away. No commission is worth that. All right. Because the first thing a seller will say to you is that my agent knew. Okay. I'm telling you right now. I've been in this business long enough and I've seen that. And they're gonna blame you. All right. Number 20, transfer of this contract. Can this contract be transferred? Yes, the seller agrees that broker may transfer this contract to another broker when the broker stops doing business, if the broker forms a new real estate business, or the broker joins his business with another. So the seller can't say you can't transfer it. You agree to transfer it right here in paragraph 20. Paragraph 21 says that no other, the seller did. Again, this goes back to this being a exclusive right to sell contract. 21 says seller will not enter into another listing contract with the property identified in paragraph 1 with another broker that begins before the end date of this contract. So you're saying I'm not going to enter into it because I shouldn't, because a exclusive right to sell contract, as we mentioned earlier, says I hire one office, one broker to sell my property, and no matter who brings a buyer, the commission is earned by the broker. So you should not be entering another. That's why I said if they say that if we go back to that paragraph where it says in the beginning, it says, does the seller have a listing contract with this property with another broker? If they say yes, that should be a red flag, and you should stop there and consult with your broker. Entire contract, I'm sorry, conflict of interest, paragraph 22. It is a conflict of interest when the broker or the licensee has a financial or personal interest in the property and cannot put the seller's interest before any other. If broker or any broker's licensees has a conflict of interest, broker will notify the seller in a timely manner. Remember, you always put, and sometimes agents don't do this, and that's probably one of my big problems with wholesaling, but your interest always comes second to the seller's interest. Your interest does not ever come above. You owe that seller, as we learned in fundamentals and practice, you owe that seller 6 fiduciary responsibilities. You owe them the fiduciary responsibility of obedience and loyalty and disclosure and accounting and let's see, obedience, loyalty, disclosure, accounting, and a reasonable degree of care. I think I left out something, right? Did I? Wait a minute. Old cards, teacher. Obedience, confidentiality, disclosure. No, old car. I'm sorry. Obedience, loyalty, disclosure, confidentiality, accounting, and a reasonable degree of care. Those are the 6 fiduciary responsibilities you owe to your client. You can't put your interest above the interest of your client, period. Anytime you do that, then you breach those fiduciary responsibilities. You cannot put your interest comes secondary. All right. Your interest comes secondary to the interest of your client. So if you have a client who wants to sell his or her property for $200,000 and says that's all I want, and you know it's worth $400,000, you, the agent, cannot say, and I know agents do it, and I know it, and I've seen it, and I see it all the time. Agent says, okay, I'll just buy it. They get 200,000, they turn around and they sell it. Well, you put your interest above the interest of your client. Your client has hired you for your expertise. Your client is expecting you to tell him or her the true value of that property. That seller may think that 200 is a fair offer, not knowing that his or her property is worth 400,000. You have an obligation to tell that client the value, the true value of his or her property, not to just say, okay, 200 is good, and you sell it to an investor, one of your investor clients who turns around, does a little bit of work and puts on the market for 450,000, and he or she walks away at 250. I remember there was a agent who, this was years ago, sold a property. It was 18th and Diamond. I'm sure if anybody's familiar with 18th and Diamond, you know a property's not worth 25,000, right? Anybody familiar with 18th and Diamond? Nobody familiar with 18th and Diamond near Temple?
Yes.
Okay. Well, 18th and Diamond is a 3-story house. The agent, the seller said she wanted 25,000 for the house, and that's what the agent gave her. The next day, he sold it for 375,000, and the house needed work, lots of work. The next day, he sold it to an investor for $375,000. The next day, she said, I'll take 25. He says, I'll give it to you. She got 25. Then he sold it for 375. The investor renovated it and sold it for over $1 million.
Horrible.
Horrible. Absolutely. That was one of the things. And I saw that was I think featured in one of the articles about wholesaling. And this was an agent who did this. This was an agent, not a, but anyhow. Changes to the contract. I'm sorry, where were we? Paragraph 23. Entire contract. This contract is entire agreement between the buyer and the seller. Remember, we don't do verbal contracts in Pennsylvania. We do written contracts. If you're making any changes to this contract, put it in writing. Put it in writing. Don't do verbal. Don't say, oh, I want you to extend this contract. That's nice. Get it in writing. An email. Have the seller send you an email saying, this contract is going to extend, or I want you to extend it it's about to expire. I want to extend it for 3 months. Don't just take the word, because if the seller comes back and says, I didn't say that, or I changed my mind, you need to have something memorialized in writing. Have everything in writing. Verbal contracts, we don't do verbal, we don't do oral contracts. They're unenforceable in court of law. We do written contracts. Make sure you get everything in writing. All right. The changes to this contract, any changes must be in writing. Again, because statute of frauds requires that all real estate related documents must be in writing in order to be enforced in a court of law. We don't do verbal contracts. Any changes, make sure they're in writing. All right. You can send I don't like text, but you can do a text. I prefer email, but you can just make sure it's in writing. All right. And my practice is when I have conversations with the seller, I then send an email just saying, hey, just as a follow-up to our conversation, this is what we decided. And then just ask them just to confirm it. That way, if anything ever comes up, I want them to confirm it. If I say we just agreed to do X, Y, and Z, I don't want them just to read it. I say, hey, I need you to confirm that this is true, because that later on you can't come back and say, well, I got the email that Trent sent me, but I didn't agree with it. No, that's why I insist that you confirm what we said is true. Do protect yourself. You want to avoid liability. You want to protect yourself. Just be smart. All right. Marketing of the property. It says we're permitted. The broker's option may use a for sale sign, lockbox, key. So whatever. You negotiate whatever you want. If they want a lockbox, they may want a sign, they may not. Only other thing down there, and D says broker will either use or MLS. I don't know why somebody would not put a property in MLS. I've seen brokers do it so they can sell it themselves. They put a sign because it's a hot market. They put a sign, they don't put MLS, and then they get a then they were able to be a dual agent. But D says the broker will not use an MLS to advertise a property, or that next box says that the broker will use the MLS. Publication of the sale price paragraph 26, the seller is aware that the MLS will publish the final sales price of the property. Sometimes sellers don't want people to know what the property sold for. I don't know why, but that they may not, but you understand that that's public information. It's going to be made public. So I've had sellers tell me, I don't want people to know what it's sold for. I said, they need to know, because how do we do comps? How do we know? We need to know the value of properties. If they don't sell for, if we don't know that your house just sold for 400, then that's information that we need to figure out the values of the properties in this neighborhood. So it's information we don't want hidden, but some sellers do. Copyrighted on paragraph 27. Obviously, the information you give is copyrighted. It belongs to you or the seller's information. If they're giving you pictures and all, you can't give it to other people. It is information that belongs to the person who provided it. And 28, fixtures and personal property. Seller, this is where we'll look at B, where it says included in the sale are all existing items permanently installed in the property. Make sure sellers understand what is a part of the property and what is not, what's included. And the problems here would be chandeliers, ceiling fans, storage sheds. I've had sellers take short storage sheds. They are included. It says here. If you look at the second paragraph, you see chandeliers and ceiling fans. I always say chandeliers has always been a problem. I've had many sellers take chandeliers down, replace them with cheap chandeliers. They take an antique chandelier down, replace it. Tell sellers if they want to take the chandelier, it's best that they replace it before you even put it on the market. And if they don't want to do that, make sure that you know exactly, you say to the seller, go find the chandelier that you're going to replace it with. We know exactly, we know the model, the color, the size, everything where it's being purchased, and put that in MLS. Put that on that agent remarks, or put that in addendum so the buyer knows exactly what that antique chandelier in the dining room is going to be removed and is going to be replaced with X. That way, when the buyer comes back on the day of the pre-summer walkthrough, looks in the dining room, that buyer is not surprised, because that buyer knows exactly what it would have been replaced with, and you don't have an issue. You don't want to create issues. I believe settlement when you go to settlement is a celebration. It's not a time to be arguing. All right, so make sure. So ceiling fans, same thing. Seller, you can't take ceiling fans. If you're going to do it, take it before we list it. Storage sheds, I've had that at least 3 times in my career. I go back to do the walkthrough, and the storage shed is gone. Seller says, oh, no, that's my property. Oh, no, it's a part of that is considered real estate. It is here. If you go down the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines, it says that it starts at the time of settlement. It says smoke detectors, carbon monoxide detectors, sump pumps, storage sheds, fences, mailboxes. Don't take any of that. If you want to leave any of this, cross it out, put it under excluded. All right. But understand, in the stove, it's got built-in appliances, a range. Make sure a seller knows that seller must leave a range. An oven must be included. And then also include anything else you want to include, or anything you want to exclude in paragraph D. These are the items that are excluded. That way you can say the ceiling fan in the living room, or the chandelier, and then you should say exactly what it's going to be replaced with, and put that in MLS. Any questions, comments? 29, taxes and special assessments. Here, it says that obviously that our agreement sale says that real estate transfer taxes will be divided equally between the buyer and the seller. That's what our contract says. But if the seller wants to pay all, or wants the buyer to pay all, then you would just put it here. Make sure you get the yearly property taxes. You get that from public records. I always ask the client too. There have been many times where where the information public records is wrong. They tell me that taxes are $2,500. Public record says $2,100, and I'm like, oh. So make sure you ask the seller. You get the information from public records, confirm it, verify it with the seller. And the other thing, the tax. Look at C, is a property preferentially assessed, including the tax abatement. If there's a tax abatement on that property, make sure, if the tax is abated, describe what kind of abatement it is and how many years remain, because that's important. If there's a tax abatement and there's 8 years remaining as opposed to 2 years remaining, it makes a difference to a buyer. So you should know that. Make sure you get that information from the seller. And if it's a condo, and D, if it's a condo condo owners association, COA or HOA, a homeowners association, get the name. Make sure you know all the assessments. What are the monthly condo fees? Are they in the capital expenditures? Because sometimes condos, they put on a new roof, and every owner has to pay an extra $500 for 6 months. I have a condo in Florida, and when I first bought it, the condo fees, in addition to the condo fees, I had to pay $1,500 for 4 months, every other month for 4 months. I'm like, $1,500, but and they didn't even tell me that. They started it 2 months after I bought it, but no one told me that they had already agreed that for 8 months, every other month, we would all pay an additional $1,500, which is what I had to do, but that was not disclosed, right? It should have been, but it was not. And then, of course, whatever the F talks about, that what are the HOA fees? You want to make sure you know all the fees if you're dealing with a condominium. Make sure you know, get the condo docs, get the bylaws, because some people buy condos to rent. Well, a lot of condo associations don't allow you to rent. Now they may allow you to do short-term rentals, but they may not allow Airbnb. So you want to make sure, you want to know what your buyer wants. If your buyer is buying it to do Airbnb and it says no rentals less than 3 months, you need to make sure you know that, because you don't want to sell your client a property that he or she can't use in the way that they want. So make sure you get those documents, pass them on to the buyer. You should read them, but tell the client to read them. Put it also on them. Hey, here goes the documents. You need to read through them. All right. Title and possession. Seller will give possession of the property to the buyer settlement, or on another date you should, but don't ever leave it blank. Just always just write NA, or just don't leave anything blank. At settlement, the seller will get full rights to the property. What is it? And C, here's what I think is important also, that the seller has, if they have mortgages, you have to put it here, but here's what you should do. Always ask for a copy of the last mortgage statement. Keep in mind that whatever's on the mortgage statement, if it says they owe $100,000, that doesn't mean if you got a payoff statement, it's going to say 100. It may be more. Maybe because of COVID, they deferred some of the payments. Maybe they were in foreclosure at one point and they just put all those fees on the back end. So you may have a statement that says they're current now and they owe 100,000, but if you've got a payoff, it may say you owe 125. So you want to make sure, ask questions, but get a mortgage, get a statement. Don't take that word that they owe 100,000. Look at that statement and ask questions. Because I've got a lot of clients that say, oh, 100,000. When I look at a statement, I said, this says 150,000. Oh yeah, I meant 150. Yeah, I meant 150. I'm like, well, that's a big difference. That may be the difference between us being able to sell the property and us not being able to sell the property. Isn't that right, Kathleen? So
Yes.
So get all, and if they have multiple mortgages, and here's the other thing, you don't listen. Sometimes I don't listen to the seller. I listen because they may, I don't listen to them. Ask the questions because they may give you answers that they think they're giving you. For instance, I have a lot of people say, I have a mortgage at Wells Fargo. I said, okay. I said, do you have any other mortgages? Oh, no. But then I said, well, what is this to TD Bank? Oh, that's not a mortgage. I got some new windows. And no, I borrowed some money to buy a car. And they used it, it's like, oh, no, this is a mortgage. Oh, I didn't know that was a mortgage. They may not know a home improvement. They don't know a home improvement loan is a mortgage or a home equity loan is a mortgage. So you should ask, who do you pay? Are there any banks that you pay? Because I've seen oftentimes, am I right with some of you who've been around, where they will tell you they have one mortgage for the fact they have 2 or 3 mortgages? Because they don't call that home, they don't call that home improvement loan, they don't know that's a mortgage. So make sure you know that, because if you're trying to sell a house and you believe they owe 100, but now when title comes, it turns out they owe 200 and the property is only worth 205, you have a problem. You cannot sell that property. So get all this stuff up front. That way you don't waste your time. Listen to property, getting it under contract. Then you got a buyer who's spending money on a home inspection, on radon, on appraisals, and then can't buy the property. And also remember this: if the seller can't deliver marketable title to a buyer, according to the agreement of sale, the buyer can be reimbursed for all the monies that he or she put out. So that seller would owe that buyer the money for that home inspection, the money for the termite, the radon, the appraisal. So keep that in mind too. So, all right, any questions or comments? Go to page, judgments. D, if the seller has any judgments or past due taxes, you want to know this stuff because past due taxes or past due water. I mean, if the seller hadn't paid taxes in years or has water that's a lot. I mean, what if it's an investment property? I've had clients that the taxes are, water's $10,000. Well, if you got a property that you're not selling a lot, that's not worth a lot, and they have all these liens and judgments and all this stuff that needs to be paid out of the proceeds, there's a good chance you may not be able to sell it at that price. So you need to figure out what the price would be in order to be able to pay off everything. So don't be fast. Make sure it's better to be accurate than to be fast. Buyer's financing. What is it? What kind of financing are you going to take? Cash is obviously, everybody's going to take cash. Conventional is the best way to go outside of cash. FHA, I would say, is a third, and VA is probably the hardest. FHA, unfortunately, in this marketplace, a lot of people aren't taking FHA. I personally am not showing buyers properties with FHA loans. That's my decision. I don't even show them with conventional. Right now, I'm not working with buyers unless they pay cash because the market's too crazy. There's too much competition. You basically need to waive a home inspection. You need to pay cash or waive the mortgage contingency, and you're going to pay more than what it's worth. I personally tell buyers to wait. This market is too volatile, and I work with a lot of first-time home buyers. I said, this is not a marketplace for you. Wait, this is not a market for you. Let's wait till this market cools down, because it's hard for you to tell a first-time home buyer to pay more than the property's worth. The property's worth $200. Well, let's offer $220. That's hard. That's a hard sell to a person who's buying the first house, huh? You mean offer $180? No, let's offer $20,000 more. I had a client who I wouldn't work with because they have a FHA loan and they wanted to buy in Delaware, and I'm licensed in Delaware, and I'm a broker licensed in Delaware. And I told them, listen, they're friends of mine. I said, listen, but I can't work with you. I think you need to wait. They called me one day. They showed me a picture of a beautiful house. It's $299, or maybe no, it was $399. Beautiful. They said, what should we offer, Trent? I said, nothing. They said, huh? I said, don't offer anything. You won't get it. I said, with your FHA loan, you won't get it. So they said, I said, matter of fact, if you get it, I will pay all your closing costs. Whatever they are, I don't care what they are. You can come by my house and pick up a check. I'll get a certified check. You can meet me at the bank. I'll give you a certified check to cover all your closing costs if you get this. They called me back the next day and said, well, Trent, we're on our way to your house to get a check. I said, you're also a liar. You got this property because they offered $425. They laughed and said, no, they had 48 offers and the highest was $525 cash. So we didn't get it. And now we decided, after losing 18 houses, we're going to wait. I said, that's what I told you in the beginning. I said, I'll work with you later, but right now it's just not a good time. All right. Special instructions 32 says any special conditions or additional terms in this contract must comply with the Pennsylvania Plain Language Consumer Contract Act. Everything, remember, has to be written in plain language. Outside of a mortgage, a deed, or a title report, we use plain language. It should be simple. Nothing should be in these complicated legalese. It should be or double negatives. It should be easy to read, plain language. 33. If you're using any addendum, this is a list of some that you may use. A property description addendum. Probably I mentioned the single agency addendum. Obviously, if you don't practice dual agency, you would use that. A vacant land addendum, short sale addendum. If you're selling a short sale, then you ought to use that. Additional terms, that's where I would put down if they are going to reduce the price. That's where I like to write the reduction. If I'm going to negotiate a reduction in price, I like to do it on the front end, especially when I know this property is too high. But let's negotiate that right now. Let's do that now. So that in 2 weeks, I can reduce this price without having to come back to you. And without you saying, oh, no, I changed my mind. I'm not even going to tell you. I'm just going to reduce it in MLS. And then we're probably going to get an offer. All right. Seller has read the consumer notice. Make sure that you get the seller the consumer notice. They have to sign that. Make sure initial that box. The seller has received the seller's property disclosure. Make sure you receive that and they initial that they received it. And the seller received the lead-based paint disclosure form. Make sure you give them that and they fill that out and they initial that they received it. All right. Seller has read the entire contract before signing. The seller must sign this contract. Seller gives permission for the broker to send information about this transaction by fax or email. Doesn't matter how you sign it. Return this agreement and any addendum on amendments, including return by electronic transmission, bearing the signature of all parties, constitute acceptance. So you can send, as you know, we do e-sign and DocuSign, fax. It doesn't matter. You don't have to use wet signatures. If you send me, you sign it and you email it to me, it is fine. Return of this addendum. I'm sorry, this contract may be executed in one or more counterparts. Some people don't realize that. If I have the same document and there are two people, one lives in California, one seller is in California, one lives in Chicago, one lives in California, one lives in Illinois, then they both can sign it and I can just put that contract together and that will constitute a full contract. As long as both of these documents are the exact same, they don't have to sign the same document. That is what a countersign is. Countersigning is. I can give the same document to multiple people. They can all sign that and you can just put it in and make it into one document. That is perfectly okay. You don't have to send it from California after that person signs it and send it to Illinois. You can simply get the person in California to sign, the person in Illinois, give it to you, you put it together. I prefer that everybody sign the same document, but if you can't, countersign it is okay. And it says that this contract may be executed in one or more counterparts, each of which should be deemed to be an original, in which counterparts together should constitute one and the same agreement of the parties. Notice before signing. If seller has legal questions, the seller is advised to consult an attorney, and you write down the name of your company, and you would sign on behalf of the broker. And having said that, that is it. And I think our timing is perfect. Any questions or comments?
Trent, I had dropped in the chat box a perfect listing for that. It's like a wholesale scam. It was I'm working with an investor client, and this was one of the properties that came up on the list. And it says in there, don't call the listing agent. They're not going to answer the phone. Contact this person. We're not going to, don't fill out a state AOS. We're not using that. It says in there that it's being assigned, like it spells out like everything in there. I'm like, how is this even able to be in the MLS right now? Like,
wait, that's an MLS?
I just put I put it in the chat box. I don't know if you guys can see it or not.
I can't see it, but I would love to know what that is. I'd like to see that.
Here, let me tell you what the address is.
Yeah, just give me the address, because that's something I want to pull up. Boy.
It's 2823 North Judson Street.
What was the address again?
2823 North Judson, JUDS.
No, I've sold houses on North Judson. I know nothing. Matter of fact, wait a minute, that's weird. I actually sold 3 houses on North Judson. I sold a lot of houses one day. Matter of fact, I was on, that's so weird. I was on Judson this week because someone may want to sell a house.
Well, if it's that one, beware.
That was one of my first properties I sold on North Judson. What do you call it? A contractor, an investor renovated it. It was only $65,000. He did a great job. That was probably 20 years ago. I remember that. I don't know, 100 block. I think that's a 2800. Any other questions, comments? We hope this was helpful to you all. I hope you learned something.
It was great.
Matt, that's it. If no one has any other questions,
All right.
comments.
Well, let's give a round of applause to Trent. Thank you very much, Trent.
You're welcome.
And thank you very much to everyone for attending today with your different questions and whatnot. Remember, Trent will be joining us again in the month of July with a couple more workshops. Keep an eye on your inbox for messages from GPAR. And with that, everybody have a great day. Thank you, Trent. Take care, and we'll talk soon.
All right. Thank you.